6-7 at McDonald's drive-thru. You can say that.
I don't know!
Hell is real, and we're living in it. At least, I would not blame you for thinking that after watching whatever that was. And honestly, seeing that clip does leave me wondering, what if God was evil? This is the exact hypothetical Stephen Law proposed in his 2010 paper, The Evil God Challenge, and it's widely considered one of the greatest arguments against a good God. His claim? That if you can believe in a good God despite all the evil in the world, then you can equally believe in an evil God despite all the good in the world. But here's the thing. It has 3 hidden assumptions that break the whole analogy. And I'll show you exactly where it fails and how an evil God may actually be impossible. But first, let me show you what the challenge actually says. First of all, when you think of a God, you imagine an infinitely powerful and infinitely good creator, not least because this is what nearly all major world religions consider God to be. But there is one major objection to a good God, and this is called the problem of evil. This states that if God was good, then why would there be evil in the world, given that God has the power to eliminate evil? Luckily, theists have defenses against the problem of evil, and these are called theodicies. One major theodicy is the free will defense that says, in order for us to have free will, we must unfortunately also be able to freely choose to do evil. This is a compromise God is willing to make for us to have free will. Or the greater goods theodicy that says God permits evils so that there can be higher order goods like compassion or bravery. But what if these good God theodicies could just be reversed and used to defend an evil God instead? Now, most people's gut reaction to an evil God would be to say, surely not, just look at all the good in the world. Look at all the joy and the laughter and the beauty. An evil God would certainly not let these things exist. We can call this the problem of good. But hold on a second. If a theist can say good disproves evil God, then why can't an atheist say evil disproves a good God? And can't those exact theodicies I just mentioned that are used to reconcile the existence of evil with a good God just be reversed and used to reconcile the existence of good with an evil God? For example, to defend the evil God hypothesis, someone could just say, God could have made us all evil, but then our evil acts wouldn't have true meaning. So he gave us free will, so that whenever we did do evil, it had the true meaning evil God desired. Or they could say evil God permits goods to allow for greater evils like grief or betrayal. And this is exactly what Stephen Law argues in the Evil God Challenge. That if you can believe in a good God despite evil in the world, then you can equally believe in an evil God despite good in the world. In other words, the Evil God Challenge aims to show us that if there is a God, who are we to say whether he's good or evil? And while this may at first seem like a formidable critique of God, it has hidden assumptions baked into it that undermine it completely. Firstly, he makes an incredibly problematic assumption about the nature of good and evil. Secondly, he assumes that each side, good and evil God, are symmetrical in their plausibility. And third, he assumes that an evil God is even possible in the first place. And today I'll show you exactly where the Evil God Challenge fails. So first of all, Law makes the error of treating good and evil as 2 separate and opposite things, like how there's red and there's blue. Under this theory, just like how something can be fully blue or fully red, something could be maximally good or maximally evil. Or even both simultaneously, like how when you mix red and blue you get purple. When working under this assumption, God could be maximally evil, since evil is a thing. However, this dualist understanding of good and evil as 2 separate things is not common in philosophy. In my view, it's a complete misunderstanding of what evil actually is. A better way of viewing evil is as the privation of good. That is to say that evil isn't a thing, but the absence of good. An analogy for this would be to think of good as light and evil as darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. Another dominant view of evil is that it's a parasite on the good, and therefore evil can only exist when there is good for it to corrupt, as articulated by C.S. Lewis. Either way, evil is not a great-making thing in its own right. It is simply the absence or corruption of good. Now that we understand the nature of good and evil, it quickly becomes clear how an evil God is much less plausible than a good God, and I'll explain how. Evil God actually contradicts many arguments for God presented by individuals like Aquinas or Aristotle. We understand God as the first cause of the universe. And as argued by classical theists like Aristotle, this means God isn't contingent upon anything to exist. And God is therefore pure act and has no potential to be any greater. This is why we consider God to be infinite or maximally great in every way. God is infinite being. For example, in Aquinas' 5 ways, God is subsistent being itself. Every limitation, every privation, every falling short makes something less great. To lack goodness is by definition to be less great. So an omni-malevolent God isn't maximally great, it's maximally defective. This is to say that the very arguments that get us to a God in the first place rule out the possibility of an evil God. You're suggesting something that's infinitely powerful, infinitely knowledgeable, and completely lacking in good. This means a God that consists of all these great making features and then just one terrible making feature, like a set of white socks with a black sock mixed in. This is because evil is the lacking of a trait. An evil God is just as likely as a dumb God, one that's infinitely powerful, infinitely good, but just doesn't know anything. How about a weak God, or a forgetful God, or a God that prefers cheese and onion crisps? All of these are defective and just as implausible as an evil God. Now, before I move on to my next point, where I'll explain how an evil God might just be completely impossible, I'll conclude by saying this. Good God has significantly more supporting evidence than evil God. While evil God is compatible with cosmological and teleological arguments for God, it's completely incompatible with Thomistic, Aristotelian, and ontological arguments for God, all of which show God to be a maximally great being, which includes maximal goodness. This is to say, evil God and good God are asymmetrical hypotheses in terms of their supporting evidence. But it doesn't stop there. What if I told you evil God is literally impossible? Let me explain. A maximally evil being must necessarily want to eliminate good things. That's what evil is. So what about the good things about evil God himself? For one thing, evil God exists, and this is good for evil God. What about the fact evil God's all-powerful? That's great for evil God. And he's all-knowing. This is amazing for evil God. He must absolutely love it. But surely then, a maximally evil God would have to deny himself his own goods, his own power, his own knowledge, and his own existence. This shows the logical impossibility of an evil God. In other words, a perfectly evil God would have to commit cosmic suicide because his existence alone contradicts his beliefs. Philosophers call this a performative self-contradiction, like saying, "My mother has no children." The statement can't be true because the act of stating it makes it false. This is to say, an omni-malevolent being can't even begin to think up his evil plans before disappearing in a puff of logic. Additionally, I think it's fair to say that our existence is a good in and of itself. Every major classical theist tradition treats existence as the first in an order of intrinsic goods. So surely our existence alone disproves an evil God. That is to say, wouldn't an evil God deny us our existence? After all, it would certainly seem worse if we didn't exist at all, even when you factor in all the evils we have to struggle with. And finally, another argument many theists use is that an omniscient or all-knowing God couldn't be evil because it would be all-knowing of the good and how to achieve it. This is because many philosophers like Plato or Socrates argue that evil exists as a misunderstanding or lack of knowledge of the good. For example, think of somebody evil. Not your mother-in-law, someone truly evil. How about Jeffrey Dahmer? Even he did what he did in the pursuit of personal goods, like joy and pleasure. He just had a destructive and twisted method of achieving these goods. Even masochists harm themselves because they get some kind of joy out of it. So it's a fair argument that an omniscient God couldn't be evil because one can only be motivated by goods, and an omniscient God would be fully aware of these exact goods. However, I would consider this a secondary rebuttal to the evil God challenge, as Stephen Law himself actually came forward and refuted this. He claimed that an evil God could be aware of these goods, but still hate them nonetheless. Is he correct in this defense? Maybe. But it doesn't really matter given all the other arguments I've presented in this video. To conclude everything I've gone through today, it seems that the evil God challenge maybe isn't so challenging after all, especially once we've addressed the faulty assumptions that it's based upon. What do you think? If you disagree, let me know in the comments below, And if you enjoyed, give a like and subscribe. And until the next one, bye bye.